The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days in Chicago, and Sarah Collins was drowning in more ways than one. The man in the corner booth didn't belong at the Rusty Spoon. Not with that suit, that watch, that predatory stillness that made the air feel electric and wrong. He'd sat there for over an hour, black coffee going cold, eyes tracking her every move like she was a problem he was solving. When he finally left, the tip line on his receipt was blank, $0. But beneath the plate, folded with surgical precision, was a napkin marked with something dark. Blood, maybe. And a message in handwriting too elegant for a place like this. 10 p.m. You have 30 seconds to live. Sarah's heart stopped. The clock on the wall read 9 hours, 59 minutes, and 47 seconds. 13 seconds. The door opened. Welcome back, my fierce hearts and midnight dreamers. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our little dark romance family stretch across cities, countries, and time zones. Every click, every comment, every bit of love you leave here helps us keep unraveling these dangerous love stories and high-stakes betrayals together. So find your quiet place, dim the lights, and get ready. Let's begin. The Rusty Spoon sat on the south edge of Chicago, where the streetlights flickered more than they worked, and the pavement buckled under the weight of decades of neglect. It was the kind of place people came when they'd run out of better options. Truck drivers killing hours before dawn halls, factory workers too bone-tired to heat up leftovers, college kids stretching a single cup of coffee across 3 hours of cramming. Sarah had worked these tables for 4 years. Before that, she'd been studying social work at community college, dreaming of a life where she could help kids like the one waiting for her at home. Then her parents died. Her father in an accident the police called suspicious but never investigated. Her mother 6 months later from what the death certificate called a heart attack. But Sarah knew was a broken heart. Suddenly she was 23 with a mute 8-year-old to raise, and bills that multiplied like rabbits. The diner paid just enough to keep the lights on in their studio apartment, and food in Toby's belly. Night shifts meant she could be there when he woke up, make him breakfast, walk him to the special school that cost more than she wanted to think about. She was 27 now, though exhaustion had carved lines around her eyes that made her look older. Her uniform was clean but worn thin at the seams. Her smile practiced enough to seem genuine. Most customers never bothered learning her name. She knew all of theirs. Tonight, the usual crowd filled the cracked vinyl booths. Eddie at the counter, construction worker with hands like slabs of concrete, nursing his third coffee and complaining about his supervisor. Maria in booth 2, late shift nurse from County General, face gray with the weight of too many deaths in 1 week. Sarah listened, refilled cups, cleared plates, moving through the routine with the muscle memory of someone who'd stopped thinking about what her life had become. At the register, she'd checked her phone earlier. At the register, Sarah glanced toward the kitchen door. Toby was back there in the break room, hopefully asleep on the makeshift cot she'd set up. Mrs. Curry, the elderly neighbor who usually watched him, had called in sick at the last minute, and Sarah had no choice but to bring him to work. She hated having him here, sleeping amidst the smell of grease and stale coffee, but she couldn't afford to miss a shift. She especially couldn't afford to lose him. Toby hadn't spoken a word since the night their parents died. The doctors said it was trauma, that he might never speak again. Social services had already come around twice, asking questions about living conditions, about whether Sarah could really provide adequate care for a special needs child. She'd smiled through gritted teeth and showed them Toby's clean clothes, his art projects, the report cards that showed he was thriving everywhere except his voice. She couldn't lose him. He was all she had left. At 9:30, the man in booth 7 had appeared like a shadow given form. Sarah hadn't even heard the door chime. One moment the booth was empty. The next he was sliding into it with the liquid grace of something apex. Asian features, sharp cheekbones, black hair styled back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Mid-30s, maybe. The suit was midnight black, perfectly tailored, the kind that whispered money so loudly it didn't need to shout. His watch caught the fluorescent light. Platinum, a piece of luxury that outshone the diner itself. He didn't look at the menu. Black coffee. His voice was low, controlled, with the barest trace of an accent. Korean, maybe. Sarah poured, hyper-aware of how her hand didn't quite shake. Up close, he smelled like rain and something darker. Sandalwood and ozone and danger. Anything else? she'd asked. No. For the next hour, he sat there. Didn't touch his phone, didn't read, just watched. At first, Sarah thought he was watching the door, waiting for someone. Then she realized his eyes followed her. When she refilled Eddie's cup, when she cleared Maria's plate, when she crouched down to pick up a dropped napkin and felt the weight of his gaze on the back of her neck like a physical touch. It made her skin crawl. It made something else inside her wake up, something she'd thought died with her dreams of college and normalcy. At 9:58, he'd stood, walked to the register like he owned the floor beneath his feet. Sarah met him there, forcing her customer service smile. Just the coffee? Yes. The total came to $3.50. He'd handed her a black credit card, the kind with no spending limit. She ran it, gave him the receipt. He signed it with a fountain pen he pulled from his jacket, the scratch of metal on paper too loud in the sudden quiet. Then he walked out into the rain without a word. Sarah looked down at the merchant copy. Tip line, $0. The disappointment hit harder than it should have. She was used to bad tips, to being invisible. But something about him, about the way he'd watched her, studied her, made the zero feel personal. Like he'd weighed her worth and found it wanting. She'd grabbed a bus tray and headed for booth 7, ready to wipe down the table and forget the strange, unsettling man in the expensive suit. That's when she saw the napkin. It sat beneath where his coffee cup had been, folded into a precise triangle. When Sarah lifted the plate, she saw the dark stain on the white paper. Blood, fresh enough to still be slightly damp. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. The handwriting was elegant, controlled. Each letter formed with the precision of someone used to signing death warrants. 10 p.m. You have 30 seconds to live. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked at the clock mounted above the register. The second hand swept past the 9. 9 hours, 59 minutes and 47 seconds. 13 seconds. The door chimed. Sarah's head snapped up. A man stepped inside, tall and broad, wearing a rain-soaked trench coat. His hand was already sliding into his jacket. She saw the dull glint of gunmetal. Saw his eyes. Flat, professional, cold as frozen lakes. Lock onto her face. The silencer emerged from his coat. Her body moved before her mind caught up. She dropped the tray, the crash of breaking dishes lost beneath the roar of blood in her ears. She ran, not for the front door. The shooter was there. Not for the kitchen. Dead end. She ran for the break room where Toby was supposed to be asleep on the cot she'd set up, wrapped in blankets because Mrs. Curry had called in sick, and Sarah had no choice but to bring him to work. Behind her, she heard Eddie shout, heard Maria scream, heard the soft foot-foot of suppressed gunfire, and the wet sound of a body hitting linoleum. Sarah burst through the break room door. Toby was awake, eyes wide with terror, scrambling off the cot. She grabbed his hand and ran for the back exit, the emergency door that led to the alley. She slammed into the push bar. The door didn't budge. Sarah, honey. Benny's voice came from behind her, sad and apologetic. I'm real sorry about this. She turned. The diner's owner. The man who'd hired her 4 years ago. Who always gave her the best shifts. Who let her bring Toby when she had no other choice. Stood blocking the break room door with a shotgun cradled in his weathered hands. They offered me $50,000, Benny said, and he actually sounded regretful. I got grandkids, Sarah. I got medical bills. You understand. Sarah understood that she'd been a fool to trust anyone in this city. She understood that the man in the expensive suit hadn't left her to die. He'd warned her. 30 seconds. Just enough time to realize she was already dead. She pulled Toby behind her, putting her body between the boy and the gun, and waited for the blast. It came, but not from Benny's shotgun. The back door exploded inward, metal shrieking. A figure moved through the rain and smoke. The man from booth 7, no longer still, no longer watching. His hand held a matte black pistol, and before Benny could swing the shotgun around, the man fired twice. Benny went down screaming. Both kneecaps shattered. The man in the suit didn't even glance at him. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides, grabbed Sarah's arm with a grip like iron wrapped in silk, and pulled her and Toby through the ruined door into the alley. A black car idled there, armored and sleek as a panther. The back door was already open. Get in. Sarah hesitated. Behind them, the shooter from the diner was coming. She could hear his footsteps. Beside her, Toby was shaking, silent tears streaming down his face. "Now," the man said, and there was no room for argument in his voice. Sarah grabbed Toby and threw herself into the car. The man slid in after them, slammed the door. The car was already moving before the locks engaged. Sarah's lungs burned. Her hands shook. She looked at the man beside her, the one who'd left $0, who'd left a warning instead, who'd just killed to save her, and demanded, "Who the hell are you?" He didn't look at her. He was checking his weapon, ejecting the magazine, counting rounds with the mechanical precision of someone who'd done it 10,000 times. "My name is Lee Sung-min," he said quietly. "And you, Sarah Collins, have been wearing something that belongs to me for the last 19 years. His eyes finally met hers, dark and fathomless and absolutely certain. "That locket around your neck? The one your father gave you before he died?" Sung-min's voice was soft as a knife sliding between ribs. "Inside it is the key to $1 billion. And every criminal organization in 3 countries wants you dead to get it." Sarah's hand flew to her throat, to the cheap silver locket she'd worn since she was 8 years old, the one her father had clasped around her neck the night before the accident, the one he'd made her promise to never, ever take off. The car accelerated into the Chicago night, rain streaming across bulletproof glass, and Sarah realized with cold, crystalline certainty that her life, the small, struggling, ordinary life she'd built from the ruins of her parents' deaths, was over. The only question now was what would rise from the ashes. The leather seat was soft beneath her torn uniform. Toby pressed against her side, still silent, still shaking. Sung-min made a phone call in rapid Korean, his voice clipped and commanding. Sarah closed her eyes and remembered the last time she'd seen her father alive. The fear in his eyes, the way he'd held her face in his hands, and told her she was braver than she knew. She'd thought he was saying goodbye. She hadn't realized he was giving her a life sentence. The leather seat was soft beneath her torn uniform. Toby pressed against her side, still silent, still shaking. Sung-min made a phone call in rapid Korean, his voice clipped and commanding. Sarah closed her eyes and remembered the last time she'd seen her father alive. The fear in his eyes, the way he'd held her face in his hands and told her she was braver than she knew. She'd thought he was saying goodbye. She hadn't realized he was giving her a life sentence. The car smelled like leather and gunpowder, and that sandalwood scent that clung to Sung-min like a second skin. Sarah's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She pressed them against her thighs, willing herself to breathe, to think, to process what had just happened. Benny had tried to kill her. The diner, the one place she'd thought was safe, had been a trap all along. Sung-min ended his call and turned to face her. In the dim light of the car's interior, his features were all sharp angles and shadows, beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, dangerous in the way fire was dangerous when you got too close. "The locket," he said. Not a question, a command. Sarah's hand flew to her throat, fingers closing around the cheap silver pendant. "No, Sarah." Her name in his mouth was a warning wrapped in silk. "I just saved your life. The least you can do is show me what 19 years of protection has bought." "Protection?" She laughed, and it came out broken, bitter. "You call this protection? A man just tried to murder me in the middle of a diner. My boss, someone I trusted, sold me out for $50,000. And you think you've been protecting me?" Sung-min's jaw tightened. "You're alive, aren't you?" The question hung in the air between them, sharp as a knife's edge. Sarah wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, to make sense of a world that had just fractured into 1,000 jagged pieces. But Toby was pressed against her side, his small body trembling, and she couldn't fall apart. "Not yet." "Where are you taking us?" she demanded. "Somewhere safe." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting." Sung-min's eyes held hers, dark and bottomless. "Your father made a deal with very dangerous people, Sarah. He took something that didn't belong to him. Something worth more than your life. More than mine. More than every person in this city combined. And before he died, he hid it." Sarah's chest tightened. "My father died in a car accident. Your father was executed." The words fell like stones. They made it look like an accident because they still thought he'd tell them where the key was. But he didn't break, even when they killed your mother in front of him. even when they threatened to come for you next. He died protecting that secret. The car suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. Sarah couldn't breathe. Her mother's heart attack, the one that had taken her 6 months after her father's death, hadn't been a heart attack at all. It had been murder. And Sarah, stupid, naive Sarah, had believed the lies because the truth was too monstrous to comprehend. Why didn't they kill me? Her voice came out barely a whisper. If they knew he had a daughter, why leave me alive? Because they didn't know where you were. Sungmin's gaze dropped to the locket at her throat. Your father was meticulous. He had 3 different children by 3 different women, all kept secret, all hidden. You were the youngest, the hardest to find. And by the time they discovered your existence, you disappeared into foster care under a different last name. Sarah's mind reeled. 3 children, 3 mothers, her father, the man who'd read her bedtime stories and taught her to ride a bike, and promised her the world would be kind if she was kind first, had lived a life she'd never known, a life built on secrets and blood and lies. Collins isn't my real name, she said numbly. No. Your birth name was Sarah Park. You were adopted by the Collins family when you were 9, after your mother died and your father disappeared. They were good people. They kept you hidden, kept you safe. And when they died in that house fire 3 years ago, that wasn't an accident either. Not a question. Sarah was learning the shape of her new reality, and it was carved from betrayal and bones. No. Sungmin's voice was almost gentle. Almost. By then, the people hunting you had tracked the adoption records. The Collins family refused to give you up, so they burned. Sarah's stomach turned. She pressed her face against Toby's hair, breathing in the scent of the cheap shampoo she bought in bulk, grounding herself in the one thing that was still real, the boy she'd raised, the brother she'd protected, the last piece of family she had left. Except he wasn't her brother, was he? That truth hovered unspoken between her and Sungmin, heavy as a loaded gun. The car turned down a narrow street, then into an underground garage that opened like a mouth swallowing them whole. The space was vast and silent, filled with vehicles that gleamed like weapons under fluorescent lights. The driver, a man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, parked near a private elevator. Sungmin opened the door and stepped out in one fluid motion. He offered Sarah his hand. She stared at it, at the long fingers and the single platinum ring on his right hand, at the violence those hands were capable of, and the strange, unsettling gentleness with which he'd pulled her from the diner's wreckage. She didn't take it. She climbed out on her own, pulling Toby with her. Sungmin's mouth curved, not quite a smile. Stubborn. Alive, she shot back, throwing his earlier word at him like a blade. Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe. Or amusement at the kitten who thought she could scratch the wolf. The elevator ride was silent. Sarah watched the numbers climb. 10, 20, 30, 40. The penthouse, of course. Men like Sungmin didn't live on the ground. They lived above everyone else, looking down on the world they controlled. The doors opened onto a space that stole her breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Chicago stretched out below them like a glittering kingdom. The penthouse was all clean lines and expensive emptiness. White marble floors, black leather furniture, art on the walls that Sarah recognized from her brief semester of art history before she dropped out. A Rothko, a Basquiat, pieces worth millions, hanging casual as photographs. Guest room is down that hall, Sungmin said, nodding to the left. There are clothes in the closet. Food in the kitchen. You and the boy will stay here until I've dealt with the immediate threats. Dealt with, Sarah repeated. You mean killed. I mean neutralized. He shrugged off his jacket, and Sarah saw the shoulder holster. The gun nested against his ribs like a sleeping serpent. Benny was a loose end. The man in the diner was a hired contractor. Neither of them were the real problem. Then what is? Sungmin crossed to the bar, poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal glass. He didn't offer her one. The real problem is that every criminal organization, from here to Seoul, knows that somewhere in Chicago, there's a girl wearing a locket that contains the access codes to 15 offshore accounts holding $2 billion in laundered syndicate money. Money that was supposed to fund the next decade of operations. Money that your father stole and hid so well that even torture couldn't extract its location. He took a slow sip, watching her over the rim of the glass. The syndicate wants it back. The triad wants to steal it. The Bratva wants to leverage it. And every two-bit gang and freelance killer in the city wants the bounty that's been placed on your head. $3 million, Sarah. Alive or dead, though alive is strongly preferred. They want that locket intact. Sarah's hand went to her throat again, fingers closing around the familiar weight of the pendant. It had been her father's last gift, the only thing she had left of him. She'd worn it every day for 19 years, through foster care and adoption and loss and poverty, through every moment of her small, struggling life. And all that time, she'd been wearing a death sentence. "Why do you care?" she asked. "If all these people want the money, what makes you different?" Sung Min set down his glass with a soft click. "Because the money is mine. Your father didn't just steal from the syndicate, he was my father's accountant. The man my father trusted above all others. And when my father was dying, when the vultures were circling and the family was fracturing, your father took the emergency funds and vanished. The money that was supposed to protect the legitimate businesses. The money that was supposed to keep my mother and sisters safe. He took it all and left us vulnerable." His voice was cold, controlled, but Sarah heard the fury beneath it, the old wound that had never healed. "My uncle used that vulnerability to stage a coup," Sung Min continued. "He killed my father, tried to kill me. Would have succeeded if I hadn't already built my own network, my own power base. It's taken me 7 years to consolidate control, to rebuild what was lost. And now, finally, I've found the key to what was stolen." He crossed the space between them, moving with that predatory grace that made Sarah's pulse jump. He stopped close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell the gunpowder and sandalwood and rain. "So yes, Sarah Collins, or Sarah Park, or whoever you decide to be, I care. I care because that locket around your neck represents everything I've lost, everyone I've failed to protect, and I will have it back." Sarah tilted her chin up, refusing to be intimidated even though her heart was hammering against her ribs. "And what happens to me when you take it? That depends. On what? On whether you're smart enough to survive what comes next." His hand rose, slow enough that she could have stepped back, could have fled. But Sarah stood her ground as his fingers brushed the side of her neck, traced the chain of the locket with a touch so light it felt like a whisper. "The 0 tip wasn't an insult, Sarah. It was a code. Benny's safe combination. I needed you to deliver something to him without knowing what you were carrying. A virus on a USB drive hidden in a coffee stirrer. Once you served me, once the drive made contact with his computer system through the security footage, I had access to everything. His ledgers, his contacts, proof that he'd been selling information on syndicate safe houses for the past 3 years." Sarah's breath caught. "You used me. I saved you." His thumb pressed against her pulse point, feeling the rapid beat of her heart. "Benny was always going to sell you out. The bounty was too high, and he was too desperate. But I made sure I was there when it happened. I made sure you'd live long enough to be useful." The words should have made her angry, should have made her hate him, but all Sarah could focus on was the heat of his touch, the way his eyes had darkened as he watched her face, the dangerous awareness that thrummed between them like a live wire. "I'm not your tool," she said, her voice rough. "No." Sung Min's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You're my salvation, or my destruction. I haven't decided which yet." He released her and stepped back, and Sarah felt the absence of his touch like a physical thing. She hated that she noticed. Hated that her skin felt cold where his fingers had been. Toby tugged on her sleeve, his wide eyes moving between Sarah and Sung Min, reading the tension in the air with the uncanny perception of children who'd learned to survive by staying quiet and invisible. "Guest room," Sung Min said again, his voice returning to that clipped, commanding tone. "Sleep. Eat. Tomorrow we figure out how to keep you alive long enough to unlock that locket without triggering the failsafe." "Failsafe?" Sarah's stomach dropped. "Your father was paranoid and brilliant. The locket has a biometric lock. Your fingerprint opens it. Anyone else's triggers a thermite charge that will melt the drive and everything within a 6-inch radius, including fingers, including faces." He picked up his glass again, took another sip. "So you see, Sarah, you're not just valuable, you're irreplaceable. And that makes you the most dangerous thing I've ever brought into my home." Sarah stood there, holding Toby's hand, staring at the man who'd killed to save her and used her as a pawn, and looked at her like she was either a miracle or a curse he couldn't quite figure out. "Get some rest," Sung-min said, dismissing her with a look. "Tomorrow, I'll show you exactly what kind of world your father left you in, and you'll decide whether you're strong enough to survive it." Sarah turned and walked down the hall. Toby pressed against her side, her mind spinning with revelations and lies and the phantom heat of Sung-min's touch against her throat. The guest room was bigger than her entire apartment, all soft grays and clean lines, and a bed that looked like heaven after years of sleeping on a second-hand futon. But when she lay down, Toby curled against her like he'd done since he was small enough to fit in the crook of her arm. Sarah didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling and thought about her father, about the man she'd loved and the man she'd never known, about the gift he'd given her that was really a curse. And she thought about Lee Sung-min, the dragon who'd pulled her from the fire, and wondered if being saved by a monster was really any different from being killed by one. The only difference, she thought as exhaustion finally dragged her under, was that monsters didn't let you go once they'd claimed you, and Sung-min had already marked her as his. Sarah woke to silence and the smell of coffee. For one disoriented moment, she thought she was back in the studio apartment, that the alarm would ring any second, and she'd have to get Toby ready for school before her shift. Then she opened her eyes and saw the floor-to-ceiling windows. The impossible view of Chicago spread below her like a conquered city, and remembered that her life as she'd known it was over. Toby was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the plush carpet, drawing in a sketchbook that definitely hadn't been there last night. His colored pencils were arranged in careful rows, and he was absorbed in creating something with the fierce concentration he brought to everything he loved. The boy who couldn't speak had always let his art do the talking. Sarah sat up slowly. Her body ached, the crash of adrenaline leaving bruises in its wake. The uniform she'd been wearing was gone, replaced by silk pajamas that felt obscenely expensive against her skin. Someone had undressed her while she slept. The thought should have terrified her, should have made her feel violated. Instead, she felt a strange awareness, a heat low in her belly that she absolutely refused to examine. She found clothes in the closet exactly as Sung-min had promised. Designer labels she recognized from magazines, sizes that fit her perfectly, which meant someone had been watching her long enough to know her measurements. The invasion of privacy should have made her angry. Instead, it just confirmed what she already knew. Sung-min was a predator who studied his prey before he struck. She chose black jeans and a simple white shirt, rejecting the dresses and delicate fabrics that felt like costumes for a life she didn't live. When she emerged from the bedroom, Toby trailing behind her with his sketchbook clutched to his chest, she found Sung-min at the dining table. He'd changed too. Gone was the blood-spattered suit from last night. Now he wore black slacks and a black shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with lean muscle and marked with ink. Pieces of the dragon tattoo she'd glimpsed last night, continuing up his arms like a serpent coiling around prey. He was reading something on a tablet, a cup of coffee steaming at his elbow, and he looked so perfectly domestic that Sarah almost laughed. Almost, because there was nothing domestic about the gun resting on the table within easy reach, or the cold calculation in his eyes when he looked up at her. "Coffee's fresh," he said. "Kitchen is stocked. Take what you want." Sarah moved past him into the kitchen, hyper-aware of his gaze, tracking her movements. The space was immaculate, all marble and steel, and appliances that were far beyond what she'd ever imagine owning, each one gleaming with perfection. She poured coffee into a mug that felt too delicate in her hands, added sugar because she needed the sweetness to cut through the bitterness of everything else. When she returned to the dining room, Toby had already gravitated towards Sung-min, showing him the drawing he'd been working on. It was the diner, Sarah realized. The rusty spoon rendered in careful detail, down to the cracked vinyl seats and the flickering neon sign. But in Toby's version, the diner was on fire, flames consuming the building while two figures stood in the foreground, watching it burn. Sung-min studied the drawing with the same intensity he brought to everything. "You're talented," he said to Toby. Not talking down, not patronizing, just stating a fact. Toby's face lit up the way it always did when someone acknowledged his art. He turned to a fresh page and started drawing again, this time sketching Sung-min's face with quick, confident strokes. "He likes you," Sarah said, sitting down across from Sung-min. "That's unfortunate for both of us." Why unfortunate? Because liking you seems dangerous. Sung Min's mouth curved. Liking me is the least dangerous thing about your situation, Sarah. He pushed the tablet across the table. Sarah looked down at the screen and felt her stomach drop. It was a news article from this morning. The headline stark and brutal. Late-night diner shooting leaves 3 dead. Below it, crime scene photos. The rusty spoon cordoned off with yellow tape. Benny's body being wheeled out on a stretcher. A white sheet covering what the bullets had done. 3 dead, Sarah whispered. But you only shot Benny. The contractor killed a customer trying to play hero. Then he killed the cook when the man came out of the kitchen with a knife. Eddie and Marcus. Good men who died because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sarah's vision blurred. Eddie with his construction worker hands and his complaints about his supervisor. Marcus who always saved her the best slice of pie. Both dead. Both gone. Because of her. Because of the thing hanging around her neck. The police will be looking for me, she said. The police will be looking for a waitress named Sarah Collins, who disappeared during the shooting. But Sarah Collins doesn't exist anymore. Sung Min pulled up another document on the tablet. A death certificate with her name on it, dated 4 years ago. As far as the world is concerned, you died in the same house fire that killed your adoptive parents. The Sarah Collins who worked at the Rusty Spoon was using stolen identity documents. The police will chase that ghost for a while, but eventually the trail will go cold. You erased me. The words came out hollow. I saved you. He said it matter-of-factly, like there was no difference between salvation and obliteration. The girl you were is dead, Sarah. The question now is who you're going to become. She wanted to throw the coffee in his face, wanted to scream at him that he didn't get to decide who she was, that she wasn't his project or his possession. But Toby was watching them with wide, worried eyes. And Sarah had learned a long time ago that survival meant swallowing rage and choosing your battles. You said there was a failsafe, she said instead. Show me. Sung Min stood and walked to a door Sarah hadn't noticed before, hidden in the wall paneling. He pressed his palm to a biometric scanner, and the door clicked open. Beyond it was a room that looked like something between a library and a bunker, floor-to-ceiling screens displaying security feeds, a workstation with enough computer equipment to run a small country, and a wall safe that probably contained enough weapons to start a war. He gestured her inside. Sarah followed, Toby close behind her, both of them, stepping into Sung Min's true domain. This was where the dragon lived, she realized. The penthouse was just the mask. Sung Min pulled out a chair at the workstation and indicated she should sit. When she did, he leaned over her, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body, smell that sandalwood scent that seemed to cling to his skin. His hand came down on the desk beside hers, caging her in, and Sarah's pulse jumped. The locket, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Take it off. You said. I said anyone else triggering it would be a problem. I didn't say you couldn't open it yourself. His breath ghosted against her ear. Open it, Sarah. Let's see what your father thought was worth dying for. Sarah's hands shook as she reached for the clasp at the back of her neck. The locket had been around her throat for so long it felt like part of her body. Removing it felt like removing a piece of her soul, but she unhooked the chain and held the pendant in her palm, feeling its weight for the first time in years. It was cheap silver, tarnished and scratched. The kind of jewelry you bought at a drugstore. Nothing special. Except when Sarah looked closer, she saw the seam wasn't quite right. The edges didn't match. It had been modified, carefully and expertly, to hide something more than just a photograph. Your thumb, Sung Min instructed. Press it to the center, Sarah did. For a moment, nothing happened. Then she felt a tiny pinprick, the biometric scanner reading her fingerprint, tasting her blood. The locket grew warm in her hand, almost hot. She nearly dropped it, but Sung Min's hand covered hers, holding the pendant steady, his fingers threaded through hers. The locket clicked open. Inside, where there should have been a photograph, there was a micro SD card embedded in a custom housing. Smaller than her fingernail, worth more than her life. $2 billion, Sung Min murmured. Compressed into something you could swallow if you needed to. He took the locket from her hand, careful not to trigger the failsafe, and inserted the SD card into a reader on his computer. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, green text on black background, the language of money and power and digital kingdoms. Account numbers, Sung Min said, his voice tight with something Sarah couldn't name. Relief? Rage? 15 offshore banks, 7 countries. Every cent accounted for. He pulled up another window, started typing commands. Sarah didn't understand. Your father was meticulous. He built in redundancies, fail-safes, dead man switches. It's going to take days to access everything without triggering alerts. Days you don't have, Sarah guessed. No. Sungmin turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. He was standing close, too close, near enough that she could see the flecks of amber in his dark irises, the faint scar bisecting his left eyebrow. The moment that locket opened, it sent a ping to a monitoring system your father set up. He wanted whoever found it to know they were being watched, which means every enemy I have now knows exactly where to find you. So this penthouse is about to become a war zone. He reached past her and pulled a handgun from a drawer, checked the magazine with practiced efficiency. I have maybe 2 hours before the first wave hits. 4 hours before they coordinate a proper assault. Sarah's mind raced. Then we leave. We run. You said you have resources. Running is what prey does. Sungmin's voice was cold, final. I'm not prey, Sarah. I'm the thing that hunts. And I'm done letting my uncle think he's won. He moved to the wall safe, input a code, and pulled out weapons with the ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. A rifle, 2 more handguns, clips of ammunition that he loaded with mechanical precision. He was arming for war right in front of her, and Sarah realized with horrifying clarity that he'd been expecting this, planning for it, maybe even looking forward to it. You knew, she said. You knew opening the locket would bring them here. Of course I knew. Sungmin's smile was sharp as broken glass. Why do you think I brought you here instead of hiding you somewhere safe? You're not just the key, Sarah. You're the bait, the trap, the thing that will make all my enemies show their faces at once so I can put bullets in them. The betrayal hit harder than it should have. Sarah had known she was a pawn, but somewhere in the dark car last night, in the moment when Sungmin had pulled her from the wreckage, she'd let herself believe he might actually care about keeping her alive for reasons beyond his own agenda. You're using me, she said, her voice flat. Yes, and if they kill me getting to you, they won't. Sungmin turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his gaze made Sarah's breath catch. I didn't spend 7 years tracking down your father's secrets just to let someone put a bullet in you before I've extracted every ounce of usefulness from your existence. You're mine, Sarah. Mine to protect. Mine to use. Mine to keep alive until I decide otherwise. The possessiveness in his voice should have terrified her, should have made her hate him. But Sarah felt something else entirely. A dark, twisted awareness that she was seen. Wholly and completely seen. Not as the struggling waitress everyone pitied, not as the foster kid no one wanted, but as something valuable, something worth keeping, even if the reasons were terrible. I don't tip what is already mine. She repeated his words from last night. Is that what I am? Your property? Sungmin crossed the space between them in 2 strides. He didn't touch her, but he stood close enough that Sarah had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Close enough that she could see the war happening behind his controlled expression. My father used to say that ownership and protection were the same thing in our world, he said quietly. You can't keep what you don't claim. You can't defend what isn't yours. His hand rose, and Sarah held her breath as his fingers brushed the hollow of her throat where the locket had rested, his touch searingly gentle. So yes, Sarah. As of last night, when I put my body between you and a bullet, when I killed to keep you breathing, you became mine. My responsibility, my asset, my problem, your weakness, Sarah said, and watched something flicker in his eyes. Perhaps. His thumb traced her collarbone, the touch making her shiver despite the warmth of the room. But weakness is just another word for caring what happens next. And I stopped caring about anything except survival a long time ago. He dropped his hand. Until you, the confession hung in the air between them, raw and unwanted. Sarah didn't know what to do with it, didn't know how to process the fact that this man, this killer, this dragon, had just admitted she'd become something more than a transaction. Before she could respond, an alarm shrieked through the penthouse. Red lights flashed on every screen in Sungmin's command center. He was moving before Sarah could react. grabbing the rifle and shoving a handgun into her hands. "Safety's off," he said. "Point and shoot. Can you do that?" Sarah stared at the weapon, felt its weight, its promise of violence. "I've never." "Then learn fast." Sung-min pulled her to her feet and pushed her toward Toby, who'd stopped drawing and was watching with frightened eyes. "Take him to the panic room, third door on the left down the hall. Code is your birthday. Stay there until I come for you. And if you don't come," Sung-min's smile was sharp and deadly, "then use that gun I gave you. Shoot anyone who tries to open the door. And when you run out of bullets, use the knife in the bottom drawer. Aim for the eyes or the throat. Don't hesitate. Don't think. Just survive." He turned to leave, but Sarah caught his arm. "Wait." He looked back at her, and Sarah saw something in his expression that hadn't been there before. Worry. Real, genuine worry. "Don't die," she said. "I need you to not die." Sung-min's hand came up, cupped her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything else about him. "I don't plan to. I have too much unfinished business with you." Then he was gone, moving through the penthouse like a shadow, and Sarah was alone with Toby and a gun, and the terrible knowledge that she'd just asked a monster not to die because the thought of his death scared her more than her own. The panic room was smaller than Sarah expected. 10 by 10 feet of reinforced steel and concrete, lined with supplies and surveillance monitors showing every angle of the penthouse. Sarah set Toby on a cot in the corner, gave him his sketchbook and pencils, and tried not to think about the gun in her hand or the man fighting for his life somewhere above them. On the monitors, she watched Sung-min move through the penthouse with lethal efficiency. The first attacker came through the window in a shower of glass. Sung-min put 2 rounds in him before the man's feet hit the floor. The second came through the front door, breaching charge, blowing it off the hinges. Sung-min dropped him with a headshot, then rolled behind the marble kitchen island as return fire chewed through the granite countertops. Sarah counted 6 attackers, maybe 7, professional, coordinated, dressed in tactical gear. They moved like soldiers, covering angles, communicating through hand signals. Sung-min moved like something else entirely. A dancer, a devil. Every motion purposeful, every shot precise. He wasn't just fighting, he was performing, demonstrating dominance, showing his enemies exactly who they'd been foolish enough to attack. But even dragons could be overwhelmed by numbers. Sarah watched one of the attackers flank around through the library. Watched him raise his weapon, line up the shot at Sung-min's exposed back. Her breath caught. The gun in her hand felt impossibly heavy. Sung-min spun, but too slow. The attacker's finger tightened on the trigger. Then the attacker's head snapped back, blood spraying. He dropped. Another figure emerged from the shadows. One of Sung-min's men, Sarah realized. The driver from last night with the scarred eyebrow. He was bleeding from a shoulder wound, but his gun was steady. The fight became chaos. More of Sung-min's people appeared, defending their territory with the same brutal efficiency as their boss. The attackers were good, but they were fighting on Sung-min's ground, by Sung-min's rules. One by one, they fell. And through it all, Sarah couldn't look away. Couldn't stop watching the way Sung-min moved, the grace and violence braided together. He was beautiful in the way a storm was beautiful, devastating and powerful and utterly beyond control. When the last attacker fell, Sung-min stood in the wreckage of his penthouse, chest heaving, face spattered with blood that wasn't his. He looked directly at one of the cameras, and Sarah felt the weight of his gaze even through the monitor. "It's over," she whispered to Toby. "We're safe." But when Sung-min came for them, when he input the code and pulled open the panic room door, Sarah knew nothing was over. This was just the beginning. He looked like a demon standing in the doorway, backlit by the emergency lighting, covered in the evidence of violence. But when he saw Sarah and Toby unharmed, something in his expression softened, just for a moment, just enough. "You're hurt," Sarah said, because she'd seen him take a graze across his ribs during the fight. "I've had worse." But he was holding his side, and when Sarah stepped closer, she saw blood seeping between his fingers. "Let me see. Sarah, sit down. Let me see." She didn't know where the authority in her voice came from, didn't know why Sung-min obeyed, but he sat on the cot, and Sarah knelt between his legs, her hands pushing his blood-soaked shirt up to reveal the wound beneath. It wasn't deep, but it was bleeding steadily. Sarah found the first aid kit mounted on the wall. Of course, there was a first aid kit in the panic room, and pulled out gauze and antiseptic. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "This is going to hurt. Everything hurts," Sungmin said. "Do it." Sarah cleaned the wound, trying not to think about how intimate this was. Her hands on his bare skin, his breath coming faster as she worked. The way his muscles tensed under her touch, not from pain but from something else entirely. The dragon tattoo that covered his chest was even more intricate up close. Black ink rendered in traditional Korean style, the creature coiling around his torso, one claw reaching toward his heart. Sarah traced the lines without thinking, feeling the heat of his skin, the thundering of his pulse. "You should be afraid of me, Sarah," Sungmin said quietly. His hand came up to cover hers, stilling her movements. "After what you just saw, after what I did, you should be running." Sarah met his eyes. "I'm not running." "Why not?" "Because I'm afraid for you." The words came out before she could stop them. "I watched those men try to kill you, and I was terrified. Not of you. For you. And that's probably the stupidest thing I've ever admitted." Sungmin's grip on her hand tightened. "I've killed people, Sarah. More than you saw tonight. More than I can count. I'm not a good man. I'm not even a man trying to be good. I know." Sarah pressed her palm flat against his chest, felt his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her fingers. "But you're the man who saved me. The man who protected Toby. The man who just fought off an army to keep us safe. So maybe you're not good, Sungmin. But you're mine." She didn't know where the words came from, didn't know what made her claim him the way he'd claimed her. But the moment the declaration left her lips, she felt the truth of it. She'd spent her whole life being invisible, being used, being left behind. And here was a man who saw her, who valued her, who would kill the world to keep her breathing. That was worth more than goodness. Sungmin's free hand came up to cup her face. His thumb brushed her cheek, the touch achingly gentle. "You have no idea what you're saying yes to. Then show me." "Sarah, show me," she insisted. "Show me what I'm choosing. Show me who you really are." For a long moment, Sungmin just stared at her. And Sarah saw the war in his eyes, the calculation fighting against something deeper, something raw and desperate. Then he was pulling her up, pulling her close, until she was standing between his spread thighs, their faces level, their breath mingling. "I'm the man who will burn this city to ash to keep you safe," he said, his voice low and fierce. "I'm the man who will make you watch while I destroy everyone who's ever threatened you. I'm the man who will lock you in a cage of gold and diamonds and call it love, because I don't know how else to care for something without owning it completely." "Then own me," Sarah whispered. "Because I'd rather belong to a monster who keeps me alive than be free and dead." Sungmin made a sound low in his throat, something between a growl and a groan. His hand slid into her hair, tilting her head back, exposing the vulnerable line of her throat. For a heartbeat, Sarah thought he might bite her there, might mark her the way predators marked their territory. Instead, he pressed his forehead against hers and breathed. "You're going to ruin me." "Good," Sarah said. "We can be ruined together." She felt his smile against her skin, felt the shift in the air between them, the acknowledgement that they'd both just crossed a line they could never uncross. Then his mouth was on hers, and Sarah stopped thinking entirely. The kiss was nothing gentle. It was claim and conquest, demand and surrender. Sungmin kissed like he fought, with precision and passion, and the absolute certainty that he would win. His hand in her hair held her exactly where he wanted her, his other arm banded around her waist, pulling her flush against him until Sarah could feel every inch of his body, every hard plane and edge. She'd been kissed before, quick fumblings with boys in high school, a brief relationship in community college, before everything fell apart. But those had been pale shadows. This was fire. This was consuming. This was Sungmin showing her exactly what it meant to belong to a dragon. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. Sarah's lips felt bruised. Her body felt electric. "The wound," she managed. "I need to finish bandaging it." "Forget the wound." Sungmin's voice was rough, barely controlled. "I need..." He stopped himself, jaw clenching. "No, not here. Not with Toby watching. Not in a panic room surrounded by bodies. When I have you, Sarah, it will be because I can take my time. Because I can show you exactly what it means to be mine. Do you understand? Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. Good. Sung-min released her with visible effort, his hands lingering for a moment before falling away. Finish the bandaging. Then we're leaving. This penthouse is compromised. We need to disappear until I can regroup. Sarah forced her hands to stop shaking as she wrapped gauze around his ribs, secured it with medical tape. Her mind was spinning with the implications of that kiss, with the dark promise in Sung-min's voice. She'd just agreed to belong to a killer, to a man who saw violence as a solution and possession as protection, and the terrifying part was that she didn't regret it. When the wound was dressed, Sung-min stood and pulled her up with him. There's a safe house in Chinatown. Underground. No one knows about it except my most trusted people. We'll go there while I figure out our next move. And Toby comes with us. Sung-min glanced at the boy, who'd been quietly drawing through everything, processing trauma the only way he knew how. I protect what's mine, Sarah. That includes him. They left the panic room and walked through the war zone the penthouse had become. Bodies lay where they'd fallen. The beautiful space was destroyed. Furniture overturned, windows shattered, blood staining the white marble floors. Sung-min's men were already cleaning up, efficient and grim-faced. The scarred man from last night nodded at Sung-min. We've secured the perimeter. No more immediate threats. Good. Clean this up. Make it disappear. I want this place wiped by morning. Yes, sir. Sung-min led Sarah and Toby to a private elevator, different from the one they'd used last night. This one went down instead of up, descending into the building's maintenance levels. They emerged in an underground garage Sarah hadn't seen before, filled with vehicles that ranged from nondescript sedans to armored SUVs. Sung-min chose a black Mercedes, bulletproof and anonymous. He opened the back door for Sarah and Toby, waited until they were settled, then slid into the driver's seat. As they pulled out into the Chicago night, Sarah looked back at the building they were leaving behind. Somewhere up there, in a penthouse that had been her prison and her sanctuary, men were erasing evidence of violence, covering up a war. And Sarah realized she didn't care. She'd spent her whole life trying to be invisible, trying to survive without drawing attention. But invisibility was just another kind of death. Sung-min had made her visible, had made her matter. And if the price of mattering was blood and darkness and belonging to a monster, then Sarah would pay it gladly. She caught Sung-min's eyes in the rearview mirror. He was watching her, his expression unreadable. No going back, he said. I know, Sarah replied. You'll see things, do things, become things you never imagined. I know. And you're still choosing this, choosing me. Sarah held his gaze. I am. Sung-min's smile was sharp and satisfied. Then welcome to the Dragon's Lair, Sarah. Try not to burn. The safe house in Chinatown was exactly what Sarah expected from Sung-min. Hidden in plain sight, accessible through a restaurant that served as a front, protected by people who looked like ordinary workers but moved with the watchfulness of soldiers. They descended through a kitchen, downstairs that shouldn't exist, into a space that was part bunker, part luxury apartment. Sung-min settled Toby in a bedroom, made sure the boy had everything he needed. Then he returned to find Sarah standing by the windows, one-way glass that showed the street above without revealing them to the world. You should rest, he said. I should demand answers. Sarah turned to face him, starting with why assassins were aiming for Toby. Sung-min's expression went cold. What? During the attack, I watched the monitors. Most of them were targeting you, but 2 split off. They went straight for the panic room. They weren't trying to breach it. They were setting charges to blow it open. They wanted Toby specifically. Sarah's voice was shaking. Why? Sung-min was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. How old is Toby? 8. He just turned 8 last month. And you've been raising him since your parents died. 4 years ago. Yes. Sarah's chest tightened with the dawning realization that she'd missed something crucial. Your father hid a lot of things, Sarah. Offshore accounts, criminal connections, his own dark past. Sung-min crossed to the bar, poured whiskey with hands that weren't quite steady, but his greatest secret wasn't the money. It was the child. Sarah felt her world tilting. No, your father didn't just work for my father. He worked for my mother too, keeping records, managing accounts. He was in our home constantly. And my mother. Sungmin's voice went tight. She was lonely. My father was always traveling, always building his empire. And your father was kind. Present. Everything my father wasn't. You're saying... Sarah couldn't make herself finish the sentence. I'm saying that 8 years ago, my mother became pregnant. Not by my father, by yours. Sungmin drank the whiskey in one swallow. It was a scandal that would have destroyed both families. So they made a deal. Your father would take the child, claim it as his adopted son, hide him until the political situation stabilized. In exchange, my father would spare your father's life and give him access to the emergency funds. Enough money to disappear if things went wrong. Toby, Sarah whispered. Toby is your half-brother. Yes. Sungmin set down the glass with deliberate care, which makes him a threat to my uncle, a legitimate heir to the family fortune. If my uncle kills me and the truth about Toby comes out, the old families will demand Toby take his place in the syndicate, a child they can control, a puppet heir. Sarah's mind was reeling. Every truth she'd built her life on was shattering. Her father hadn't adopted Toby out of kindness. He'd taken the boy to hide him. Toby wasn't her brother. He was Sungmin's brother. And Sarah had been raising the heir to a criminal empire without knowing it. The locket, she said. The money. It wasn't just stolen funds. It was Toby's inheritance. Yes. Sungmin moved closer. Your father was protecting my brother, protecting my family's future. And when my uncle killed him for it, when he came after your mother, your father made sure Toby would be hidden so thoroughly that no one could find him. He gave the boy to you, Sarah. Made you his guardian without ever telling you why. Because he trusted you to keep Toby safe. But I didn't know. Sarah's voice broke. I didn't know what I was protecting him from, which is exactly why you succeeded. Sungmin's hands came down on her shoulders, grounding her. If you'd known the truth, you would have run differently, hidden differently, made different choices. Your ignorance was Toby's greatest protection. Sarah felt tears burning her eyes. So everything. The adoption, the fire that killed my parents, the diner job, all of it was just moves in a game I didn't know I was playing. Yes, and now? What happens to Toby now? Sungmin's grip tightened. Now. He stops being your brother and becomes mine. Now I protect him the way I should have been protecting him all along, if I'd known he existed. Now we use the money your father died hiding to destroy my uncle and everyone who's ever threatened our family. Our family, Sarah repeated. The words felt strange. Foreign. I'm not family, Sungmin. I'm just the girl who got caught in the middle. You're the woman who raised my brother. Sungmin's voice was fierce. You're the woman who kept him safe when I couldn't. You're the woman who loved him without knowing he was worth billions, without knowing he had a drop of syndicate blood in his veins. That makes you more family than most of the people who share my last name. Before Sarah could respond, the door to Toby's room opened. The boy emerged, sketchbook in hand, and walked straight to Sungmin. He held up the drawing he'd been working on. Sarah's breath caught. It was a portrait, Toby and Sungmin side by side. The resemblance was subtle but unmistakable once you knew to look for it. The shape of their eyes, the curve of their mouths, the way they both held themselves with a watchful stillness. Below the portrait, in careful letters, Toby had written a single word, brothers. Sungmin stared at the drawing for a long moment. When he looked up at Toby, his expression was raw, vulnerable. You knew. Toby nodded. He pointed to Sungmin, then to himself, then to the picture. Then he smiled, the first smile Sarah had seen from him since the night their parents died. You knew, Sungmin repeated, his voice barely a whisper. And you were waiting for me to figure it out. Toby nodded again. Then he did something that broke Sarah completely. He reached out and took Sungmin's hand, squeezed it tight, and held on. Sungmin dropped to his knees in front of the boy. For the first time since Sarah had met him, the dragon looked utterly human. I'm sorry, he said roughly. I'm sorry I didn't find you sooner. Sorry I didn't protect you. Sorry you had to hide and be afraid. But I'm here now, and I swear on everything I have, everything I am, no one will ever hurt you again. Toby threw his arms around Sungmin's neck, and Sung Min held him like he was the most precious thing in the world, his control finally cracking, his carefully maintained distance shattering. Sarah watched them and felt her heart break and rebuild itself in the same moment. This was family, not blood, but choice, not obligation, but love earned through sacrifice and survival. When Sung Min finally released Toby and stood, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. He looked at Sarah, and the emotion in his gaze was devastating. "Thank you," he said simply, "for keeping him alive, for keeping him whole, for being what he needed when I couldn't be." Sarah crossed the space between them and took both their hands, Sung Min's and Toby's, binding them together. "We're family now," she said firmly. "All three of us. So we protect each other. Agreed?" Sung Min's hand tightened around hers. "Agreed." Toby squeezed both their hands and nodded solemnly. Outside, the Chicago night deepened. Somewhere in the city, Sung Min's uncle was regrouping, planning his next attack. The war was far from over, but standing there in the hidden safe house, bound together by truth and trauma and a fierce determination to survive, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. And as Sung Min pulled both her and Toby close, as they stood together in the kind of embrace that felt like armor, Sarah realized she'd finally found what she'd been looking for her entire life: a place to belong, people worth fighting for, a reason to stop running and start standing her ground. The dragon had claimed her. But she'd claimed him right back, and together, they would burn the world before they let anyone take this fragile, fierce family away. The call came at dawn. Sarah woke to find Sung Min already dressed, standing by the windows with his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, controlled, speaking rapid Korean, but she'd learned to read the tension in his shoulders, the way his free hand clenched and unclenched at his side. Something was wrong. When he ended the call, he didn't turn around, just stood there, silhouette against the rising sun, looking like a man preparing for his own execution. "What is it?" Sarah asked, pulling the silk robe tighter around herself. "My uncle wants to negotiate." Sung Min's voice was flat, empty. "He's offering a ceasefire, a chance to end this without more bloodshed." Sarah's stomach dropped. She'd seen enough movies, read enough thrillers to know that ceasefires in this world were just pretty words for traps. "What does he want?" Sung Min finally turned. His face was a mask, every emotion locked down tight. But his eyes were screaming. "You and Toby, in exchange for peace and a guarantee that the remaining accounts will be split fairly between the families." The room tilted. "You can't be considering this. I don't have a choice." He crossed to the bar, poured whiskey even though it was barely 6 in the morning. "He has leverage. 3 of my key lieutenants, their families. He's threatening to execute them one by one until I comply, starting with Jinho's daughter. She's 7 years old, Sarah." Sarah felt sick. This was the world Sung Min lived in. A world where children were currency, where loyalty was purchased with the threat of slaughtered innocents. There has to be another way. There isn't. Sung Min drank, the motion mechanical. "This is how it ends. I trade you for their lives. My uncle gets the access codes. The war stops. Everyone walks away. Except me and Toby." Sarah's voice cracked. "We're the ones who don't walk away." Sung Min set down the glass with deliberate care. "No, you don't." The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Sarah had known. Somewhere deep down, she'd always known, that when it came down to choosing between her and his empire, the dragon would choose power. But knowing and experiencing were different kinds of pain. "I see." She stood, wrapped her dignity around herself like armor. "When?" "Noon. Neutral ground. The old warehouse district by the river." Sung Min wouldn't meet her eyes. "You have 3 hours to say goodbye to Toby. To prepare him." "Prepare him for what?" "For the fact that the man he thinks is his brother is selling him to a monster." Now Sung Min's gaze snapped to hers, and the fury there was volcanic. "You think I want this? You think this doesn't destroy me? But I have hundreds of people depending on me, Sarah. Families who've sworn loyalty. Children who only exist because their parents believed I would protect them. What am I supposed to do? Let them all die for 2 people?" "Yes!" Sarah shouted. "If those 2 people are your son and the woman." She stopped herself, the words dying in her throat. The woman what? Sungmin moved closer, predatory and desperate. Say it, Sarah. Finish that sentence. But she couldn't, because admitting it would make the betrayal hurt even more. The next 3 hours passed in mechanical silence. Sarah dressed in the clothes Sungmin provided. Dark jeans, a black jacket, practical shoes. She packed a bag for Toby with his sketchbook, his pencils, the few things that brought him comfort. The boy watched her with knowing eyes, understanding without words that something terrible was coming. When Sungmin's car pulled up to the warehouse, Sarah felt the weight of finality. This was where her story ended. Not with freedom, not with love, but with a transaction. A zero-sum game where she'd always been the losing bet. The warehouse was exactly what she'd expected. Rusted metal, broken windows, the smell of decay and river water. Sungmin's uncle waited in the center, flanked by a dozen armed men. He was older than Sungmin, his face carved with cruelty and years of violence. When he smiled, it was all teeth and malice. "Nephew," he said in accented English. Always so punctual, Sungmin's hand was iron around Sarah's arm, dragging her forward. She tried to pull away, but his grip was merciless. Toby walked beside them, small and silent, clutching his sketchbook like a shield. "The package, as promised," Sungmin said, his voice cold enough to freeze blood. "Now release my people." The uncle gestured. 3 SUVs pulled up, doors opening to reveal the hostages, beaten, terrified, but alive. They stumbled out, were immediately surrounded by Sungmin's men who'd been waiting at the perimeter. "Such trust you have," the uncle mocked. "Willing to trade your precious key for these nobodies." The deal was clear. Sungmin shoved Sarah forward. She stumbled, caught herself, turned back to look at him. His face was stone. No emotion, no regret. "Sungmin," she whispered. A plea, a prayer. He didn't respond. Just nodded to his uncle's men, who grabbed Sarah and Toby, started dragging them toward a waiting van. Sarah struggled, screaming his name. But Sungmin was already walking away, his back rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. He didn't look back. The van door slammed. Darkness swallowed them. Sarah pulled Toby close, felt his tears soaking into her jacket, and wondered if this was how her father had felt, knowing he'd sacrificed everything and everyone for survival, only to die anyway. The drive lasted 40 minutes. When they stopped, Sarah was hauled out into a compound that looked like a fortress. High walls, armed guards, cameras everywhere, the uncle's stronghold. The place no one had been able to find, no matter how many resources Sungmin had thrown at the problem. They were brought to a great hall, all dark wood and stolen art. The uncle sat in a throne-like chair, looking pleased with himself. He gestured Sarah forward. "The locket," he demanded. "Give it to me." Sarah's hand went to her throat. The chain was still there, the pendant warm against her skin. The last piece of her father, the last piece of herself. "If I refuse," the uncle pulled a gun, pressed it against Toby's temple. "Then I paint the walls with the boy's brain and take it from your corpse anyway." Sarah's hands shook as she unclasped the chain. This was it. The moment everything her father had died protecting would be lost. The moment the dragon's empire would be completed by the wrong monster. She held out the locket. The uncle snatched it, greedy and triumphant. "Finally," he breathed. "Finally, everything that should have been mine from the beginning." He pressed his thumb to the center, trying to activate the biometric lock. Nothing happened. He tried again. Again. His face contorted with rage. "What is this? Why won't it open?" Sarah felt a smile tugging at her lips. A terrible, dangerous smile. "Because it's a fake. The real locket would have melted your fingers off by now." The uncle backhanded her. Sarah's head snapped to the side, blood filling her mouth. But she was laughing now, tasting copper and victory. "You're holding a piece of cheap tin and a GPS tracker, and you just led the dragon right to your doorstep." The uncle raised the gun, pressed it to her forehead. "Then you've just made yourself useless. Have I?" Sarah met his eyes. "Or have I just made myself the only person who can give you what you want? Kill me, and that drive is locked forever. Keep me alive, and maybe, I'll cooperate." It was a bluff. A desperate, stupid bluff. But it bought her time. The uncle lowered the gun slightly. "We have ways of making people cooperate. I'm sure you do. Sarah wiped blood from her mouth. But torture takes time, and I'm guessing you have enemies who are very interested in what happened to Sungmin's delivery. How long before they figure out where you are? She saw the calculation in his eyes, the realization that she was right. Before he could respond, Sarah's attention snagged on something. A sound, barely audible, a rhythmic beeping coming from the locket in his hand. Sarah's eyes widened. The uncle looked down, confused. The beeping was getting faster, and then Sarah remembered Sungmin's whisper as he'd shoved her toward the van. Words meant to look like a curse but shaped like a promise. The service hasn't started yet. The locket wasn't just a key, it was a tracker, and the beeping meant the north wall exploded. Concrete and steel erupted inward in a shower of debris. Sarah grabbed Toby and dropped, covering his body with hers as the world turned to chaos and fire. Through the smoke and screaming, she saw them. Sungmin's forces, flooding the compound like an avenging army. And at the center of it all, walking through the flames like they couldn't touch him, was the dragon himself. Sungmin moved through the uncle's guards with surgical precision. Every shot found a target. Every motion was deadly grace. He wasn't just fighting, he was performing a massacre. And the dance was beautiful and horrifying in equal measure. The uncle scrambled backward, raising his gun. But Sungmin was faster. He shot the weapon from the old man's hand, then closed the distance in 3 strides. You should have known, Sungmin said, his voice carrying over the gunfire. The dragon doesn't trade his treasure. He just finds new ways to burn his enemies. He turned then, his eyes finding Sarah through the smoke. And the look on his face, relief and fury and something darker, something possessive, made her breath catch. Are you hurt? He demanded, crossing to her. Sarah struggled to her feet, still shielding Toby. You used us. You turned us into bait. Yes. No apology in his voice. I needed to find this place, needed to get inside, and you were the only thing my uncle wanted badly enough to reveal his location. He cupped her face, thumbs brushing away the blood at her mouth. I told you, Sarah. I don't trade what's mine. I just make my enemies think I do. You could have told me. No. His grip tightened. You needed to believe it. Needed to be genuinely terrified, genuinely betrayed. Otherwise, my uncle would have known it was a trap. His forehead pressed against hers. I'm sorry. For the fear. For the pain. But I'm not sorry for keeping you alive. Sarah wanted to hit him. Wanted to kiss him. Wanted to scream. But Toby was pulling on her jacket, and Sungmin's men were securing the compound, and there wasn't time for any of it. The locket, she said. Your uncle has it. Sungmin's smile was sharp. No. He has a replica I had made 3 days ago. The real one never left you. He touched her collarbone, just above her heart. I had my best forger create a duplicate while you slept. Same weight, same appearance, but worthless. The real locket is in the safe at the Chinatown house. Sarah stared at him. You planned all of this. From the beginning. From the moment I left that note in the diner. Sungmin helped her to her feet. Every move. Every betrayal. Every moment of terror. All of it was necessary to get us here. To end this war decisively. He was right. Sarah could see it now. The elegant brutality of his strategy. But that didn't make the fear she'd felt any less real. Next time, she said quietly. Trust me enough to let me help plan the trap. Sungmin's expression softened. There won't be a next time. This ends today. The compound was secured within the hour. Sungmin's forces moved with practiced efficiency, rounding up the uncle's remaining loyalists, securing the perimeter. But the victory wasn't complete. Sungmin's lieutenants were shouting orders, their faces grim. The uncle was gone. He'd slipped away during the breach, vanishing through a hidden tunnel in the safe room before the smoke cleared. Sarah watched from the sidelines, Toby pressed against her side. The boy was shaking, traumatized by the violence, and Sarah stroked his hair while trying to process everything that had just happened. Sungmin approached them, his face smeared with soot and blood that wasn't his. We secured the compound, but my uncle is in the wind. He escaped? Sarah asked, fear spiking in her chest. For now. But he lost his fortress. He lost his army. He's running scared, Sarah, and hunted men make mistakes. Sung-min's voice was cold. He tried to kill my brother. There is nowhere on earth he can hide from me. Sarah wanted to feel satisfaction, wanted to watch the man who'd terrorized them suffer. But all she felt was exhaustion and a desperate need for this nightmare to be over. There's something else, one of Sung-min's men said, approaching cautiously. We found a cell in the basement. There's someone down there, he claims. The man hesitated. He claims he's Sarah's father. The world stopped. Sarah couldn't breathe, couldn't process the words. Her father was dead, had been dead for 4 years. She'd mourned him, moved on, built a life from the ruins of his choices. That's impossible, she whispered. But Sung-min's expression told her it wasn't. They descended into the basement, each step feeling like walking into her own grave. The corridors were narrow, damp, smelling of mildew and despair. Prison cells lined the walls, most empty. But at the end, in the last cell, illuminated by a single bare bulb, her father sat on a concrete bench, head in his hands. He looked older, thinner. Gray streaked his hair, and his face was lined with suffering. But it was him. Unmistakably, impossibly him. Dad? Sarah's voice broke on the word. His head snapped up. When he saw her, something flickered in his eyes. Hope, maybe. Or calculation. Sarah, he breathed. Oh, sweetheart, you found me. Sung-min unlocked the cell. Sarah stumbled forward, her legs moving without conscious thought. 4 years. 4 years of grief and guilt and struggling to survive. 4 years of thinking he was dead. She threw her arms around him, sobbing. I thought you were gone. I thought they killed you. Her father's arms came around her, but the embrace felt wrong, too tight, too desperate. I'm here, he murmured against her hair. I'm alive. We can finally. His hand moved to her throat, fingers clawing for the chain of the locket, but his fingers met only skin. He froze. Then he shoved her back, staring at her bare neck with horror. Where is it? Reality crashed through Sarah's grief like shattered glass. Dad, the locket! He shrieked, his eyes wild and all pretense of love gone. Where is the locket? Where is my money? I don't have it. You lost it? He grabbed her shoulders, shaking her violently. The accounts, the billions. That's why I hid it with you. That's why I made you wear it. You were always just. He stopped himself, but the damage was done. Just what? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Just the safest place to hide it. Her father's expression hardened. You were a child. No one would suspect a child. And if they found you, if they hurt you, he shrugged. The failsafe would destroy the data. Either way, I was protected. Sarah felt something inside her shatter. You used me, your own daughter. You were never my daughter. The words exploded out of him, vicious and raw. You were Park's mistake. The child of a woman I never loved, a responsibility I never wanted. But you were useful, trusting, easy to manipulate. He lunged for her throat again. Now give me the locket before I take it. Sarah stumbled backward. Her father advanced, and she saw the weapon he'd hidden in his sleeve. A makeshift blade, sharp and deadly. I didn't survive 4 years in this hell to let some stupid girl ruin everything, he snarled. You'll give it to me, or I'll cut it off you. He raised the blade. The gunshot was deafening in the confined space. Her father screamed, dropping the weapon as blood bloomed across his thigh. He collapsed, clutching the wound, and Sarah looked up to see Sung-min standing there, gun raised, expression colder than winter. Touch her again, Sung-min said quietly, and the next bullet goes through your skull. He crossed to Sarah, pulled her behind him, putting his body between her and the man who just destroyed every memory of love she'd ever had. Sarah's father was sobbing now, the pain and fury mixing into something pathetic. She's nothing, just a tool. You don't understand. The money, I earned it. It's mine. Family isn't blood, Sarah, Sung-min said, his eyes never leaving her father. It's who bleeds for you, who protects you, who sees your worth beyond what you can provide. He finally looked at her, and the tenderness in his gaze made her chest ache. Your father taught me that, by showing me exactly what family should never be. Sarah's legs gave out. Sung-min caught her, lowered them both to the ground. and held her while she shattered. All the years of believing her father had loved her, had sacrificed for her, had died protecting her. All lies. She'd been nothing but a storage unit, a human safe deposit box. "I'm sorry," Sungmin murmured against her hair. "I'm sorry you had to learn this. Sorry I didn't kill him before you saw." "He's not worth your bullets," Sarah said, her voice hollow. She looked at her father, this stranger, wearing a familiar face, and felt nothing. No love, no hate, just a vast, echoing emptiness. Let him rot in this cell. Let him die knowing the money he destroyed his soul for will never touch his hands. Sungmin helped her stand. They walked out together, leaving her father screaming threats and pleas behind them. Sarah didn't look back. There was nothing there worth remembering. In the corridor, she stopped, turned to Sungmin. "You knew. That's why you brought me down here. You wanted me to see. You needed to see." His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "You needed to understand that the man who gave you life didn't give you value. You created that yourself. Through every sacrifice, every moment of love you showed Toby, every time you survived when you had every reason to give up. I feel like I don't know who I am anymore," Sarah admitted. "Everything I believed. Then we'll figure out who you are together." Sungmin's forehead pressed against hers. No lies, no manipulation, just truth, no matter how brutal. Sarah's hands fisted in his shirt. Promise me you'll never use me the way he did." "I can't promise that." The honesty was startling. "I'm a monster, Sarah. I will use every resource I have to protect what's mine. And you," his voice roughened, "you're the most precious resource I have. So yes, I will use you. Your strength, your mind, your ability to survive. But I will never make you feel worthless. Never make you doubt your value." His lips brushed her temple. "Because you're not a tool to me. You're the reason I'm still fighting to keep this empire standing." It wasn't a declaration of love. It was something more complicated, more honest. And Sarah found herself accepting it, found herself nodding against his chest. They returned to the main hall. Toby was waiting, his eyes wide with questions. Sarah knelt before him, took his small hands in hers. "The man downstairs," she said carefully. "He's not who I thought he was. He's not family. Not anymore." She looked up at Sungmin, then back at the boy. "But you are. You and Sungmin. You're my family. The only family I choose." Toby threw his arms around her neck. And Sarah held him, this child who wasn't her brother but was more than blood could ever be, and let the last pieces of her old life crumble away. When they emerged from the compound, the sun was setting, painting the Chicago skyline in shades of fire and blood. Sungmin's hand found hers, their fingers threading together. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Now we rebuild." Sungmin looked at the city spread before them. "The war is over. The accounts are secure. My uncle will face justice." He turned to her. "And you decide what role you want to play in all of this. Partner, queen, or just the woman I protect." Sarah thought about it. About everything she'd survived, everything she'd learned. The girl who'd served coffee and hidden from the world was gone. In her place stood someone harder, someone who'd looked at monsters and not blinked. "I want to be the woman who stands beside you," she said. "Not behind, not beneath. Beside." Sungmin's smile was slow, dangerous, proud. "Then prepare yourself, Sarah Collins. Because standing beside a dragon means you burn with the same fire." "Good," Sarah said. "I'm tired of being cold. 2 weeks. That's how long the fragile peace lasted before everything went to hell again." Sarah had started to believe, foolishly, naively, that they'd won. Sungmin's uncle was imprisoned, facing the council's judgment. The compound had been seized, its assets absorbed into Sungmin's organization. The accounts her father had stolen were being slowly, carefully unlocked, the money redistributed to rebuild what had been destroyed. She'd even started sleeping without nightmares. Then came the night of the extraction. Sungmin had business across the city, a meeting with the heads of the other families to formalize the new power structure. He'd wanted Sarah to come, to be introduced as his partner, but she'd convinced him to let her stay at the Chinatown safe house with Toby. The boy had been having panic attacks, the trauma catching up with him now that the immediate danger had passed. He needed stability, routine, not more violence. Sung Min had agreed reluctantly, leaving a full security detail to watch them. It wasn't enough. The attack came at midnight. Explosives breached the ground floor entrance. Armed men poured in, professionals, coordinated, wearing the insignia of Sung Min's uncle's most loyal faction, the ones who'd gone underground after the compound fell. Sarah grabbed Toby and ran for the safe in the bedroom wall. She didn't have time to get a weapon, but she snatched the real locket from its velvet case, shoving it down her shirt just as the door splintered open. They cut her off before she could reach the panic room. She fought, using the self-defense moves Sung Min had been teaching her. But there were too many. They subdued her with brutal efficiency, zip-tied her wrists, threw her and Toby into a van. "The boss sends his regards," one of them said, and Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. The uncle had escaped. They were driven to a different location, an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of the city. Sarah was dragged out, forced to her knees on cracked concrete. Toby was pulled from the van, crying silently, and Sarah's heart shattered watching him struggle against his captors. "Easy, boy," one of the men said. "Your father will be here soon." And he was. 20 minutes later, a convoy of vehicles arrived. Sung Min emerged from the lead car, flanked by his lieutenants. But his weapons were holstered, his hands visible. He'd come unarmed, negotiating. The uncle stepped out from the shadows of a building, and Sarah's breath caught. He looked worse than he had in the compound, thinner, his face gaunt with hatred and pain, but his eyes burned with vindictive triumph. "Nephew," he called out. "So good of you to join us." "Release them!" Sung Min's voice was controlled, but Sarah could hear the fury beneath it. "This is between us. They have nothing to do with your vendetta. They have everything to do with it," the uncle gestured. "This woman, this bastard child. They're the reason you betrayed your blood, the reason you chose outsiders over family. They are my family." Sung Min took a step forward. "And if you harm them, there is nowhere in this world you'll be safe from me." The uncle laughed, the sound brittle and unhinged. Brave words from a man who has no leverage. He pulled a sniper rifle from one of his guards, moved to a balcony overlooking the courtyard. "But I grow tired of talking. Let me show you what happens to dragons who forget their place." He raised the rifle, and Sarah saw with horror that he was aiming not at Sung Min, but at her. Time slowed. Sarah saw Sung Min's expression change, saw the calculation, the terrible math of distance and trajectory. Saw him make a decision. He ran, not for cover, not for his own vehicle. He ran toward her, closing the impossible distance between them. The rifle fired. Sung Min's body slammed into hers, momentum carrying them both to the ground. Sarah felt his weight, his warmth, felt him wrap himself around her, shielding every inch of her with his own body. Then she felt the wetness spreading across his chest. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Sung Min's breath was ragged against her ear. "I'm all right. He coughed, and Sarah felt something warm spray against her neck. Blood. Too much blood. "Sung Min?" She tried to push him off, to see the wound, but he wouldn't let her move. Wouldn't stop protecting her even as his own life was leaking out. Chaos erupted. Sung Min's men returned fire, advancing on the uncle's position. The courtyard became a war zone, but Sarah could only focus on the man in her arms, the dragon who'd taken a bullet meant for her. "You stupid, arrogant." Her voice broke. "You can't die. I won't let you die." "Didn't ask permission," Sung Min managed, and even now bleeding out. He was smiling. "Told you. I protect. What's mine?" His eyes fluttered closed. "No!" Sarah screamed his name, pressing her bound hands against the wound in his chest, trying to stop the bleeding. But there was so much blood, and it was everywhere, and she couldn't lose him. Someone was pulling her away. Jin Ho, Sung Min's scarred lieutenant, was lifting Sung Min's body, carrying him toward a vehicle. "We have a medical team standing by. He'll make it. He has to make it." Sarah was shoved into the same vehicle. Toby pressed against her side. She watched Jin Ho and another man work on Sung Min, applying pressure, starting an IV, their movements practiced and desperate. The dragon's face was gray, his breathing shallow. "Stay with me," Sarah begged. taking his hand in her bound ones. "Stay with me, you bastard. You don't get to die after everything we survived." His fingers twitched in hers, barely, but enough. The underground clinic was a sterile nightmare of fluorescent lights and the smell of antiseptic. Doctors swarmed Sungmin the moment they arrived, cutting away his blood-soaked shirt, shouting medical jargon Sarah didn't understand. She was pulled aside, her zip ties cut, Toby taken to another room to be checked for injuries, and then there was nothing to do but wait. Hours passed. Sarah sat in a plastic chair, staring at her hands, still stained with Sungmin's blood, and tried to process what had happened. He'd taken a bullet for her, had run into gunfire without hesitation because the alternative was watching her die. No one had ever done that for her, ever valued her life above their own. The doors to the surgical suite finally opened. A doctor emerged, exhausted but steady. "He's alive." The bullet missed his heart by inches, collapsed a lung, broke 2 ribs, but he's alive. He's in a medically induced coma, while the worst of the trauma heals. The next 48 hours are critical. Sarah nodded numbly. "Can I see him? He's not conscious." "Can I see him?" The doctor sighed. 5 minutes. Sungmin looked smaller in the hospital bed, hooked up to machines that beeped and whirred. His chest was bandaged, his face pale beneath the oxygen mask. Sarah pulled a chair close and took his hand, careful of the IV lines. "You're an idiot," she told him, her voice breaking. "A reckless, self-sacrificing idiot. And if you die, I will find a way to bring you back, just so I can kill you myself." His fingers twitched. Not much, but enough to feel deliberate. "I mean it," Sarah continued, tears streaming down her face. "You don't get to leave me. Not now. Not after you made me care. Not after you made me believe I was worth protecting." The door opened behind her. Jin-ho entered, his expression grim. "We have a problem." Sarah wiped her eyes. "What kind of problem?" "The uncle escaped in the chaos. And the other lieutenants." Jin-ho's jaw clenched. "They're questioning whether to continue supporting Sungmin. With him in a coma, with his leadership compromised, they're wondering if it's time to divide the territory, to take what they can before everything collapses. Like hell." Sarah stood, squaring her shoulders. "Where are they?" "The conference room." "But Sarah, you can't. Watch me." She marched out of the hospital room, Jin-ho scrambling to follow. The conference room was down a sterile hallway, behind reinforced doors. Sarah didn't knock. She slammed them open, the sound making every head turn. 12 of Sungmin's top lieutenants sat around the table. Hard men, dangerous men. Men who'd killed and bled and built an empire through violence. And they were arguing about abandoning the dragon now that he was wounded. Sarah walked to the head of the table, where Sungmin's empty chair sat. She didn't ask permission. She sat down, folded her hands on the table, and stared at each man in turn until they squirmed. "I understand there's been some confusion," she said quietly. "Some question about leadership, about loyalty, about whether it's time to cut your losses." "Miss Collins," one of them started. "This isn't personal, it's business. With Sungmin incapacitated, we need to think about the locket." Sarah reached up, pulled the chain from beneath her shirt, let the pendant fall against her chest. "This is what you want, isn't it? The access codes to billions. The key to everything Sungmin has been rebuilding." The room went silent. "Let me be very clear," Sarah continued. "This locket opens for one person. Me. And if I die, it triggers a failsafe that destroys every byte of data. Permanently. Irrevocably." She leaned forward. "So here's what's going to happen. You are going to sit in your chairs, shut your mouths, and wait for your boss to wake up. You are going to continue operations exactly as he instructed, and you are going to remember that the only thing standing between you and bankruptcy is the woman sitting in his chair. You think you can threaten us?" One of the younger lieutenants stood, his hand moving toward his weapon. "You're nothing. Just some waitress," he decided to. Sarah pulled a gun from her jacket, one of Sungmin's, lifted from his bedside table, and pointed it at the man's chest. Her hand didn't shake. "Sit. Down." The lieutenant's eyes widened. He sat. "I am not nothing," Sarah said, her voice steel wrapped in silk. "I am the woman your boss took a bullet for. I am the woman who survived assassination attempts, torture, and betrayal. I am the woman who raised his son, unlocked his stolen fortune, and stood beside him while he burned his enemies. She set the gun on the table with a soft click. And I am the woman who will put a bullet in anyone who tries to take this empire apart while he recovers. Are we clear? Slowly, one by one, the men nodded. Good. Sarah stood. Jinho will coordinate daily operations. Any major decisions get run by me first. And if anyone has a problem with that arrangement, she picked up the gun again. My door is always open. She walked out, her legs somehow steady, her heart hammering against her ribs. Only when she was back in Sungmin's hospital room, door closed, did she allow herself to collapse. She'd just threatened a room full of killers, had bluffed her way into running a criminal empire. And somehow, impossibly, they'd believed her. A soft sound made her look up. Sungmin's eyes were open, just barely, glazed with pain medication but aware. He was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You heard that, she whispered. His hand moved, gesturing weakly for her to come closer. Sarah approached the bed, and Sungmin's fingers brushed her cheek, his touch feather-light. My queen, he rasped, the words barely audible. My fierce, ruthless, queen. Then his eyes closed again, slipping back into medicated darkness. But Sarah saw the smile on his lips, the pride in that small curve. She'd terrified a room full of criminals, had claimed authority she had no right to, had transformed from prey into predator in the space of one conversation, and the dragon approved. Sungmin recovered slowly. The bullet wound healed, the collapsed lung reinflated, but the real damage was to his reputation. Word spread through the underworld. The dragon had been wounded, had bled. The other families began testing boundaries, probing for weakness. It couldn't continue. Sungmin needed to demonstrate strength, needed to remind everyone why crossing him was fatal. He proposed a wedding, not to Sarah. Not yet, though the promise hung unspoken between them. A political wedding to Min Seo, the daughter of the most powerful rival family. A union that would cement the peace, bring together the two largest territories, end the possibility of future conflicts. It was strategic, practical, exactly the kind of move a smart leader would make. Sarah hated it. You can't be serious, she said when he told her. They were in his penthouse, a new one, since the old had been too compromised. This space was colder, more fortress than home. It's necessary. Sungmin was standing by the windows, backlit by the city lights. 3 weeks out from surgery, and he still moved carefully, his chest bound beneath expensive shirts. Min Seo's father controls the port access. He wants my uncle dead as much as I do. The man is a loose cannon threatening everyone's business. That's why they agreed to the theater. So Min Seo knows? She knows. She gets the publicity of a royal wedding, I get my trap, and tomorrow we quietly annul it, citing political differences. Everyone wins. Except my uncle. This wedding is the only way to force him out. He'll see it as the final insult. Me marrying into the family that should have been his allies. He'll make a move. And when he does, we'll be ready. Sarah understood the strategy. Hated that she understood it. And what am I in this scenario? The mistress you keep on the side? You're the trap. Sungmin crossed to her, his hands framing her face. The wedding is theater. A performance to draw out my enemies. But you, his thumb traced her lower lip. You're the weapon they won't see coming. Explain. Over the next hour, Sungmin laid out his plan. The wedding would be held at the most prestigious venue in Chicago, a cathedral that had been neutral ground for decades. Every major family would attend, along with their security, their allies, their power structures. It would be the largest gathering of criminals in the city's history, and Sarah would be there. Not as a guest, not as Sungmin's partner. As a server, you want me to waitress your wedding, Sarah said flatly. I want you in position where no one will notice you. Sungmin pulled out building schematics, photographs, detailed plans. My uncle will be there. He won't be able to resist seeing me marry someone else, seeing his nephew claim the victory that should have been his. He'll hide among the guests, disguised, protected. But he'll be there, and when you identify him, you'll already be armed. You'll already be close. And you'll do what needs to be done. Sungmin's eyes were dark, serious. This isn't about me proving I'm strong enough to lead. This is about us proving we're stronger together. That you're not just my partner, you're my equal. Sarah thought about it. About the symmetry of ending where they'd begun. In a room full of people who didn't see her, carrying a message meant to save or destroy. I want Toby safe, she said. Somewhere far from the city. Somewhere your uncle can never find him. Already arranged. Jinho is taking him to Seoul tomorrow. My mother's family will protect him. Sarah nodded slowly. And after? When this is over? Sungmin pulled her close, careful of his still healing ribs. After, we rebuild. We create something different. Still dangerous. Still powerful. But ours. His lips brushed her temple. No more secrets. No more lies. Just us and the Empire will forge together. You're asking me to become what you are, Sarah said. A killer. A criminal. A monster. I'm asking you to become who you already are. Sungmin's hand tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. You stood in front of my lieutenants with a gun and made them kneel. You've survived assassination attempts. Raised my son. Unlocked billions. You're already a monster, Sarah. I'm just asking you to own it. She kissed him then. Fierce and desperate, pouring every complicated emotion into the press of lips and teeth and tongue. Sungmin responded with controlled passion, his hands in her hair, his body a line of heat against hers. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Sarah whispered, "Let's paint the altar red." Sungmin's smile was sharp as broken glass. That's my queen. The wedding was beautiful in the way disasters were beautiful. All white flowers and candlelight masking the violence beneath. Sarah, dressed in the black and white uniform of the catering staff, her hair pulled back, makeup subtle. She looked like every other server in the venue. Invisible, forgettable, perfect. She worked the floor with practiced ease, carrying champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres, her eyes constantly scanning. Sungmin stood at the altar in a black tuxedo, easily more expensive than anything she could afford, looking every inch the powerful leader. Minseo beside him was lovely. Delicate features, traditional dress, playing her role perfectly. The ceremony began. Sarah moved through the crowd, serving drinks, listening to conversations. The guests were exactly who she'd expected. Family heads, high-ranking members, politicians on criminal payrolls, the kind of people who shaped cities through violence and money. And there, sitting 3 rows back, partially hidden by a larger man, was Sungmin's uncle. He'd disguised himself well. Different hair, prosthetics, changing his face shape, clothes that made him look 20 years older. But Sarah recognized the way he held himself, the hatred burning in his eyes as he watched his nephew marry into power. She approached his row from behind, keeping her face angled away. Her hair dyed a severe black and styled to change her profile. "Champagne, sir?" The uncle didn't even turn his head. He was too focused on the altar, too arrogant to look at the help. He waved a hand dismissively, refusing the drink without making eye contact. Sarah smiled at the back of his head and moved on. Her hand brushed the serving tray, fingers finding the familiar shape hidden beneath. Not a submachine gun. Too obvious, too loud. Something more elegant. A pistol with a suppressor, sleek and deadly. The ceremony concluded. Sungmin and Min Seo sealed their union with a kiss that looked convincing enough to fool everyone except Sarah, who could see the calculation in the dragon's eyes. They processed down the aisle, and the guests began to mingle, moving toward the reception hall. This was it. The moment of chaos when attention would be divided. Sarah caught Sungmin's eye across the room. He gave the smallest nod. She dropped the serving tray. The crash was loud enough to make everyone turn. Sarah apologized profusely, bending to clean up the mess. And as she crouched, her hand slid beneath her uniform jacket, found the weapon. The uncle was moving, trying to slip out in the confusion, trying to escape before he was recognized. Sarah straightened, the weapon concealed beneath a thick, folded service towel draped over her arm, and walked directly into his path. "Excuse me, sir," she said sweetly. "You dropped this." She pressed the towel-covered muzzle against his ribs. The uncle looked down, saw the weapon, and his eyes went wide with recognition. "Hello," Sarah whispered. "Remember me?" She pulled the trigger 3 times. The suppressor made the shots sound like champagne corks popping. The uncle stumbled backward, clutching his chest, blood blooming across his stolen vest. Sarah dropped the napkin, stepped back, and screamed. "He's got a gun." Chaos erupted. Security swarmed. Guests scattered. And in the confusion, Sung Min was there, pulling Sarah aside, positioning himself between her and the cameras. "Clean?" he murmured. "Gloves. No prints." Weapon was cold. Untraceable. Sarah's hands were steady. Her voice was calm. She'd just killed a man in front of hundreds of witnesses, and she felt nothing but satisfaction. Perfect. Sung Min's hand found hers, squeezed once. "Wait for my signal." The venue descended into controlled chaos. The uncle was pronounced dead at the scene. Security footage was immediately confiscated. Witnesses gave contradictory statements, some saying they'd seen the uncle pull a weapon, others claiming a server had screamed first. By the time police arrived, the story was airtight. A deranged criminal had infiltrated the wedding, attempted to assassinate the groom, and was shot by security. Tragic. Unavoidable. Case closed. Sarah slipped out with the other catering staff, changed in a service bathroom, and emerged in the simple black dress she'd worn beneath the uniform. She walked out the front entrance like any other guest, got into a waiting car, and was driven to a secondary location. Sung Min met her there an hour later, no longer in his tuxedo. "It's done. My uncle is dead. The families are unified. The territory is secure. And your bride will be annulled by morning." She knew the truth, that the wedding was theater. Her father got what he wanted, my public alliance. I got what I wanted. My uncle dead and my position uncontestable. He approached Sarah, his movements predatory. "And you got your revenge." Sarah thought about the uncle bleeding out on the cathedral floor, about her father rotting in a prison cell, forgotten, about every person who'd tried to use her, hurt her, make her small. "No," she said quietly. "I got my power." Sung Min's expression shifted, pride and desire, and something darker mixing together. "Say it. Say what you are." Sarah met his eyes. "I'm the queen of this city, partner to the dragon, mother to the heir, the woman every enemy will fear and every ally will respect." She stepped closer, her hand sliding up his chest. "I'm yours, and you're mine. And together, we're going to burn anyone who forgets it." Sung Min's control snapped. He kissed her with bruising intensity, hands fisting in her hair, body pressing hers against the wall. This wasn't gentle, wasn't tender. This was claim and conquest. Two predators recognizing each other as equals. When they broke apart, Sarah's lips were swollen, her dress askew. Sung Min looked equally wrecked, his careful facade cracked to reveal the hunger beneath. "Come home with me," he said, his voice rough. "Let me show you what you've earned." "What have I earned?" "Everything." His hand cupped her face. "My empire, my loyalty, my protection. He stopped, the word catching in his throat. "Your what?" Sarah pushed. "My heart." The admission seemed torn from him. "You have my heart, Sarah. What's left of it? Whatever parts aren't already scorched by violence. They're yours." Sarah felt tears burning her eyes. "I love you. I love you. And I hate that I love you. And I wouldn't change a single thing about how we got here." "Neither would I." Sung Min kissed her again, gentler this time. "Come home. Let me worship you the way queens deserve." They drove through Chicago in the back of an armored car, the city lights streaking past. Sarah's head rested on Sung Min's shoulder, his arm around her waist, both of them silent and content, the dragon and his queen. The monster and the woman who'd become monstrous to stand beside him. Tomorrow they would deal with the politics, with consolidating power, with teaching Toby what it meant to be an heir to darkness. But tonight was theirs. The car pulled into an underground garage. They rode the elevator to a penthouse neither had been to before. A clean slate, a new beginning. When the doors opened, Sarah saw that Sung Min had prepared. Candles lit the space. The windows showed the city spread beneath them like a conquered kingdom. "One more thing," Sung Min said, pulling a small box from his jacket. Sarah's breath caught. "Is that, the debt is paid," he said, echoing the words from their first meeting. "Your father's betrayal, Your years of suffering, everything you've survived. He opened the box, revealing a ring that was somehow both beautiful and dangerous. A black diamond surrounded by smaller stones that caught light like stars. Now I'm the one who owes you. For saving my son, for saving my empire, for saving me. He dropped to one knee, and Sarah's hands flew to her mouth. Marry me, Sung-min said simply. Not for politics, not for strategy. Marry me, because you're the only person I've ever trusted. The only person I've ever... He swallowed hard. The only person I've ever loved. Sarah dropped to her knees beside him, taking his face in her hands. Yes, yes to all of it. The empire, the danger, the life that will never be normal. Yes to you. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Of course it did. The dragon had always been meticulous. They stood together, and Sung-min swept her into his arms, carrying her toward the bedroom. Sarah laughed, the sound bright and genuine, the first time she'd laughed without restraint in longer than she could remember. I'm going to ruin you, she warned. You already have, Sung-min replied, and I've never been happier. He laid her on the bed with reverent care, his hands mapping her body with touches that promised worship and possession in equal measure. Sarah arched into him, giving herself over to the dragon's fire, letting herself burn. Outside, the city pulsed with life. Somewhere, in a prison cell, her father rotted. Somewhere, in Seoul, Toby was safe with Sung-min's family. Somewhere, the empire they'd bled to build was settling into new patterns. But here, in this moment, there was only Sarah and Sung-min, the waitress and the dragon, the monster and the queen. And as he made love to her with devastating thoroughness, as he whispered promises and threats and declarations against her skin, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she'd found exactly where she belonged. Not in safety, not in normalcy, but in the arms of a man who would burn the world to keep her breathing, who saw her darkness and called it beautiful, who made her feel powerful and precious and profoundly, violently loved. The dragon had claimed his treasure, and the treasure had claimed him right back. In the end, they were both exactly what the other needed. Fire and fury, passion and power, love wrapped in violence and sealed with blood. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was something darker, something truer. It was their story, and it was only just beginning.